The slap came without warning. My glasses flew across the hospital room, hitting the wall before clattering to the floor. The left lens cracked on impact, a spider web of lines fracturing my vision. I stood frozen, my hand rising slowly to touch the burning imprint on my cheek. "Don't you ever interfere in my family again," Jasmine hissed, her manicured finger inches from my face. "This is when you should disappear." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across my son's body. James lay still on the hospital bed, covered to his chest with a thin white sheet, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. I couldn't cry. Not yet. The shock of his death at 43 from a ruptured cerebral aneurysm had numbed me to my core. Now standing in this sterile room with my daughter-in-law's handprint burning on my cheek, I felt something else stirring beneath the grief. Something I couldn't yet name. I bent slowly to retrieve my glasses, my knees protesting the movement. At 62, I'd thought my battles were behind me. I'd buried a husband, built a career teaching history to 3 generations of Charleston teenagers, and looked forward to quiet evenings tending to my roses and reading books that had nothing to do with state curriculum requirements. I didn't know then that the slap was just the beginning of a plan Jasmine had been crafting for months. I didn't know that my son had foreseen it all, or that I would need every ounce of strength I'd cultivated over 6 decades to protect the most precious thing James had left behind: his son, my grandson, 9-year-old Marcus. The phone had rung at 2:13 that morning. I remember checking the clock, my heart already racing, before I answered. No good news comes at that hour. The hospital's voice was clinical, detached. "Mrs. Jackson, your son James has been admitted with what appears to be a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. You should come immediately." I drove through the quiet streets of Charleston in my nightgown, a coat thrown hastily over my shoulders, my silver hair uncombed, my fingers stiff around the steering wheel. The historic gas lamps cast eerie shadows through the Spanish moss that draped the ancient oaks, a ghostly canopy guiding me toward the hospital. I was too late. James was already gone when I arrived. The doctor spoke gently, but his words fell like stones. Massive aneurysm, no warning signs, nothing could have been done. I sank into a chair, my body hollow. James, my brilliant, compassionate son, gone. "Where's Marcus?" I asked suddenly, thinking of my grandson alone and frightened. "His mother hasn't arrived yet," the nurse said. "She's been notified." Jasmine arrived 2 hours later, sweeping into the waiting room in designer clothes, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, though dawn had barely broken. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently on her phone as she muttered about traffic. "Marcus is with the Wilsons," she said before I could ask. "I called them. Our neighbors. At least Marcus wasn't alone. But the fact that Jasmine hadn't thought to bring him to let him say goodbye to his father struck me as telling, though not surprising. "James is gone," I said, simply searching her face for genuine reaction. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw something flicker in her expression. Relief calculation. Then her features settled into a carefully rehearsed mask of shock. She murmured lines about not saying goodnight, about how sudden it all was. But her eyes remained dry behind those tinted lenses. When decisions needed to be made about releasing James's body and arranging the funeral, she brushed it all onto me with a casual, "You know him better." I didn't notice the man watching us from across the waiting room. Not then. Later, I would recognize Richard Townsend from the real estate development company, where James worked as legal counsel. Later, I would understand the significance of how Jasmine's gaze kept finding his, how her phone never left her hand. But that morning, I was drowning in grief, unable to see the currents already pulling my family apart. James and I had a complicated relationship. I raised him alone after my husband Samuel died in a car accident when James was just 12. Those teenage years tested us both. James was brilliant but angry, missing his father, and pushing against my attempts to both mother and father him. We weathered those storms, though. He graduated with honors, went to law school, became the man his father would have been proud of. When he was 8, just before Samuel died, we planted an oak sapling in our backyard. "This tree will grow with you," Samuel told him. "Strong, steady, with deep roots." That oak now towers over my garden, its branches spreading wide, offering shade and witness to 30 years of family history. James brought Marcus to that tree when he was born, holding his infant son up to the rustling leaves. "Deep roots," he whispered. "The memory stings now." The funeral was held beneath the great oaks of Magnolia Cemetery, where the wind carried the faint brine of the Cooper River. James lay in a polished mahogany casket adorned with white lilies. I sat in the front pew, Marcus tucked close against me, his small body trembling with sobs that racked his shoulders. My grandson's grief was raw, unvarnished. I held him tightly, whispering small comforts as his tears soaked my sleeve. On my other side, Jasmine performed her role with calculated precision. She wore a black silk dress that seemed designed more for a photo shoot than mourning. Her makeup flawless waterproof mascara, dabbed occasionally with a monogrammed handkerchief that never grew damp. She leaned against me at carefully measured intervals, murmuring lines like, "He would have loved this turnout," and James spoke so highly of them all. To the mourners, we must have looked like two women united in grief, the widow and the mother. But I felt how lightly she rested on my shoulder, how quickly she straightened whenever someone of importance approached. I watched her eyes scan the crowd, assessing status wealth connections. She was less a grieving wife than a hostess at a networking event. Story after story came from James's friends and colleagues. One woman clasped my hands, whispering, "Your son reduced his fees when I couldn't afford my divorce. He saved my house. He saved me." An elderly man with trembling hands said, "He was the only attorney who listened. He cared about justice, not billable hours." Each memory was a bittersweet gift. They painted a portrait of the man my son had become, principled, compassionate, quietly heroic. I tucked their words into my heart, knowing one day Marcus would need them like stepping stones across the river of his loss. But even as I absorbed these tributes, I could not shake my attention from Jasmine. I noticed the subtle shift in her voice when she spoke to James's wealthy clients versus his childhood friends. I noticed how during the reception, she slipped away to have intense whispered conversations with Richard Townsend, the tall man in the expensive suit I recognized from the hospital. When I approached, she quickly introduced him with calculated casualness. "Eleanor, this is Richard Townsend, one of James's real estate partners." His handshake was brisk, his condolences perfunctory. But when Jasmine's fingers brushed his arm, the gesture was too familiar, too intimate for mere business associates. I filed it away. My academic training in psychology and history had taught me to observe, to catalog, to connect dots. Even in grief, I could not stop analyzing, searching for the truth beneath performances. As dusk fell, an exhaustion weighed on me. Marcus curled up on a velvet sofa in the funeral home's side parlor, finally succumbing to sleep. His tear-stained face pressed against my lapel, his small hand clutching mine even in dreams. That was when Michael Robinson approached me quietly, James's closest friend since law school and his attorney. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his voice steady. "Eleanor, we need to speak soon," he said, keeping his voice low. "There are provisions in James's will that require immediate attention. He made changes recently. He wanted you to know." A chill swept through me. I looked down at my sleeping grandson, so vulnerable in his exhaustion. Changes. Before Michael could answer, Jasmine appeared at his elbow, her tone syrupy, but her gaze sharp. Tomorrow would be best. The sooner we resolve things, the better for Marcus. Her words curdled inside me. This was not about Marcus, not for her. I could see it in the calculating gleam behind her practiced grief. That night, after carrying my sleeping grandson home to my house, where he often stayed on weekends, I watched the clock tick toward morning, unable to sleep. Something in Michael's expression, in Jasmine's too eager intervention, had set off warning bells I couldn't ignore. The next afternoon found me seated in Michael Robinson's law office, a stately brick building off Chippewa Square. The familiar scent of old leather and polished mahogany clung to the air, a place where James had once spent so many hours working beside his closest friend. Michael looked drawn, the grief heavy in his eyes, yet his professionalism never faltered. Across from us sat Jasmine, her face pale and perfectly composed, a pair of pearl earrings gleaming against her dark hair. She crossed her legs with studied grace, one manicured hand tapping an impatient rhythm against the armrest. Michael cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses as he began to read. "James updated his will 3 months ago," he said. My pulse quickened. 3 months ago. Michael continued, his voice measured. To his wife, Jasmine Avery Jackson, he leaves the Folly Beach cottage, his investment portfolio with Coastal Capital, and a life insurance policy valued at $500,000. Jasmine's lips curved, slightly smug satisfaction evident, but it faltered almost instantly as Michael went on. To his mother, Eleanor Jackson, he bequeaths the family home on Magnolia Street, both personal vehicles and his private accounts at First Palmetto Bank. My heart lurched. The home where James and Marcus had lived, the house filled with memories of birthdays, Christmas mornings, and the treehouse James built for Marcus in the backyard. That house was left to me, not Jasmine. Jasmine's mask cracked. "That can't be right," she snapped. "We purchased the house together. It's marital property." Michael calmly slid a folder across the desk. "James bought the house in his name 2 years before your marriage. It was never converted to joint ownership. The deed and mortgage are solely his." Her hands tightened on the leather armrests, the faintest tremor in her fingers betraying her shock. Michael pressed on. "Regarding Marcus's future, James established an education trust. Eleanor, you are named sole trustee. All funds related to Marcus's care and schooling fall under your oversight." The silence in the room was electric. I felt the weight of it settling over me, both the honor and the burden of my son's foresight. Jasmine's voice sharpened nearly a hiss. "James and I discussed our estate plans extensively. This isn't what we agreed upon." Michael's tone remained steady. "James executed this will legally and with full capacity. He came to me personally. The changes were deliberate." My mind reeled. Why had he done this in secret? What had he seen that I had missed? Then Michael's gaze met mine. "There's one more matter. James left a sealed envelope for you, Eleanor. His instructions were clear. It was to be delivered privately outside of this meeting." He placed a cream-colored envelope gently into my trembling hands. My name, written in James's careful handwriting, stared back at me. The sight of those letters, so familiar from birthday cards and little notes left on my kitchen counter over the years, made my eyes sting with fresh tears. Jasmine leaned forward, her tone smooth, but edged with steel. "Eleanor, you know James would never want Marcus uprooted from his home. You already have your own house. Surely you're not going to take this one away from his son." Her manipulation was masterful, framing my son's legal wishes as cruelty toward my grandson. But I knew better. James had done this for a reason. "I need time," I said softly, closing my fingers around the envelope. As we left, I caught Jasmine in the lobby, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice lowered but furious. "He blindsided me. The house, the cars, even Marcus's fund. It's all under her control. No, he didn't suspect. It must have been his mother's influence. I'll fight this. I deserve more." I didn't move. I didn't let her see me. But my heart pounded. She hadn't even left the building before plotting her counterattack. That evening, alone in my quiet house on Live Oak Drive, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. My hand hovered shaking over the seal. What had James discovered? What had he feared? And why had he entrusted me, his aging mother, with the future of his only child? I stared at the envelope for hours before I finally opened it. My hands trembled, the paper tearing with a soft rip that seemed louder than thunder in my silent kitchen. Inside was a single page of James's stationery from Robinson and Merrill Law. His familiar handwriting leaped out at me, sharp, deliberate, each word etched with urgency. "Mom, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. I'm so sorry to leave you with this burden, but there's no one else I trust. My marriage has been failing for some time. What began as distance has turned into something darker. I've discovered things about Jasmine that make me fear for Marcus's well-being, and for you. I've put safeguards in place. The house, the vehicles, the accounts, they're not for you alone. They're meant as tools to keep Marcus safe, to make sure he has one parent figure who will put him first. Jasmine will fight this. She'll manipulate, threaten, and perform. Do not let her know what you know. Document everything. Trust Michael. And when the time comes, protect Marcus. There's a safe deposit box at Coastal Trust number 219. The key is enclosed. What you'll find there will help you understand why I've taken these precautions. I love you, Mom. Always. James! I pressed the letter to my chest, sobbing until my throat was raw. Even facing the possibility of his own death, my son had been thinking ahead, thinking of us. But there was something else in the envelope tucked behind the letter. A small brass key with the number 219 etched into it. A safe deposit box key. No explanation beyond what was in the letter. Just another piece of the puzzle James had left behind. The enormity of what he had done and what he was asking of me settled heavily on my shoulders. At 62, I had thought my battles were behind me. I had buried a husband retired from teaching and looked forward to quiet evenings reading novels on my porch. But James was asking me to become a protector, a strategist, a warrior. I thought of Marcus, his sweet brown eyes red from crying at the funeral, his small hand clinging to mine. He had lost his father. He could not afford to lose a stable home as well. When I finally fell asleep in my armchair, the letter still clutched to my chest, I dreamed of James as a boy, 8 years old, Marcus's age, building forts in the backyard, declaring that he would always protect me. Now it was my turn to protect his son. The next morning I called Michael. My voice was steady, though inside I was shaking. I've read James's letter. He anticipated all of this. He left a key to a safe deposit box. I don't know what's in it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Michael said, "Eleanor, I think I do. Don't go to the bank alone. We'll go together tomorrow." As I hung up, I felt the first glimmer of something stronger than grief taking hold. Resolve. For Marcus's sake, I would become whatever I needed to be. 2 days after the funeral, Jasmine appeared at my house unannounced. I was in the kitchen helping Marcus with his spelling words when the front door opened and her heels clicked against the hardwood floor like warning shots. "Eleanor," she called, her voice syrupy sweet, "we need to talk." She entered the kitchen with a faint smile, carrying 2 lattes from a cafe downtown. She handed one to me as though we were girlfriends instead of uneasy adversaries, then sat at the island with a theatrical sigh. "This house is too much for you," she began without preamble. "So many memories, so much upkeep. It's overwhelming for me, and I'm 35. I can't imagine how exhausting it will be for you." I felt Marcus stiffen beside me, his pencil pausing mid-word. He looked at me anxiously, his eyes wide with uncertainty. "Why don't you finish that last word at the table, sweetheart?" I said softly. "I'll be right here." When he moved out of earshot, Jasmine leaned forward, her manicured fingers tightening around her coffee cup. "I found a condo on the riverfront," she said. "Modern, secure steps from the cultural district. Marcus would thrive there. The only problem is the will. James made a mistake, Eleanor. He wasn't himself. We need to fix it." Her gaze bored into mine. "Transfer the house to me. It's what James would have wanted for Marcus to stay with his mother in his own home. You already have your place. This is ours." Her voice quivered at the edges of the word ours, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. I tilted my head, feigning hesitation. "That's a lot to consider, Jasmine. These decisions shouldn't be rushed. James only updated the will 3 months ago. Surely he had reasons." Her smile froze, but her eyes hardened. "He was under tremendous stress. You know how work consumed him. He wasn't thinking clearly. That's why I'm asking you as Marcus's grandmother to do the right thing." The right thing. How easily those words rolled off her tongue, coated in honey but dripping poison. "I'll think about it," I said gently, sipping the latte I had no intention of drinking. "But perhaps we should give Marcus time before making major changes." Relief flickered in her expression, the faintest glimmer that she believed she had me halfway convinced. "Of course," she purred. "Just don't wait too long. Children need stability. If the condo goes off the market, I'd hate for Marcus to lose such an opportunity." Artificial urgency, straight from a negotiation playbook. I recognized the tactic from my years mediating school district disputes. After she left, Marcus came back into the kitchen, his face pale. "Grandma, are we moving?" he asked, his voice small. I knelt, holding his hands in mine. "Not unless you want to, sweetheart. You're safe here." His shoulders relaxed as he whispered, "I don't want to leave. Dad built my treehouse here." Later that evening, I walked across the street to visit Judge Walter Thompson, retired from the bench but sharp as ever. He had been a quiet presence at James's funeral, his weathered face lined with sympathy. When I explained Jasmine's proposal, his expression darkened. "Eleanor, grief makes people reveal themselves," he said gravely. "Document everything. Dates, times, words. Use neutral language, no accusations. If this goes to court, facts matter more than feelings." I nodded. I had taught human behavior for 30 years. I knew performance when I saw it. Jasmine was playing a role, and she thought I was too old, too broken by grief to resist her script. But she had underestimated me. That night I began a journal. Every detail went into it. Jasmine's latte visit, her phrasing, Marcus's reaction, even the time she arrived and the color of her dress. Facts, not feelings. It was the first entry in what I suspected would become a long record of battles yet to come. The next morning I drove to Marcus's school, St. Francis Academy, where James had also studied as a boy. I'd requested a meeting with his teacher, Mrs. Carter, a woman I'd known for years from my time on the district curriculum committee. "Eleanor," she greeted me warmly, her eyes soft with sympathy. "I'm so sorry about James. He was one of our brightest alumni." "Thank you, Jean. I'm concerned about how Marcus is coping," I said, settling into a child-sized chair that made my knees protest. "Have you noticed any changes?" She nodded slowly. "He's withdrawn, his work is suffering, and—" She hesitated. "Jasmine has missed 2 parent-teacher conferences since school began. James always attended, but she's canceled both times." I filed that information away, careful to keep my expression neutral. "Also," Mrs. Carter continued, lowering her voice, "yesterday, Marcus had a mild asthma attack during recess. The school nurse said his inhaler wasn't in his backpack. When we called Jasmine, she didn't answer. We had to use the emergency inhaler." My heart tightened. James had been meticulous about Marcus's asthma care. He'd had it himself as a child. "I'll make sure he always has his medication." I promised, making a mental note to document this too. As I left the school, my phone rang. It was Marcus's pediatrician, Dr. Eliza Washington. She'd been Marcus's doctor since birth and a friend of mine from church. "Eleanor, I'm calling about Marcus's prescription refill," she said without preamble. "It's overdue, and I've left 3 messages for Jasmine." Another piece of the pattern forming. "I'll take care of it, Eliza. Thank you for letting me know." That evening, I added these details to my growing journal. The missed conferences, the forgotten inhaler, the ignored prescription notices. Small things alone, perhaps, but together they painted a picture of neglect that chilled me. It was Marcus who told me first. We were sitting on the porch swing one Thursday evening, the cicadas humming in the magnolia trees, when he blurted it out. "Grandma, Mom says we're going to Miami this weekend with her friend Richard. He has a yacht." The words were casual, but his eyes betrayed unease. He twisted the hem of his t-shirt, a habit I'd noticed whenever he was nervous. I forced my voice to remain calm. "Miami. That sounds sudden. Did your mom tell you when you're leaving?" He shook his head. "She just said to pack shorts, but I have a science project due Monday. Dad always helped me with projects. I don't want to miss it." His little voice broke and the sound splintered my heart. I stroked his hair, steadying my tone. "Your project matters, sweetheart. Let me talk to your mom." But when I called Jasmine that night, she brushed me off with breezy assurance. "Marcus needs new experiences, Eleanor. He's been through so much. A yacht trip will be therapeutic. Besides, Richard has friends in Miami with connections good for all of us. Don't worry about some little project. Teachers understand grief." My stomach knotted. Grief for her had become a shield she wielded whenever convenient. For Marcus, it was an open wound. The next morning, I arranged for a security system to be installed at my house cameras in the common areas, motion alerts routed directly to my phone. Michael had insisted, and now I understood why. I also made a quick trip to the pharmacy to refill Marcus's asthma prescription, tucking an extra inhaler into my purse. Something told me he might need it. That weekend, while Marcus was gone, I could not rest. I paced the quiet house, clutching James's letter like a talisman. I imagined my grandson in a strange hotel room, seasick on some stranger's yacht, wishing he were home building his solar system model. I thought about James, who at 9 had been terrified of deep water, until Samuel spent an entire summer gently coaxing him into the waves. Had Jasmine even remembered Marcus's fear? Did she care? I channeled my anxiety into action researching Townsend development online. They were behind the controversial Harbor Point project, a luxury high-rise complex that had faced opposition from preservation groups and environmental activists. James had mentioned it once, his voice tight with concern about wetland impact studies that didn't add up. Now his law firm represented the developers, and Richard Townsend was taking my grandson on his yacht. The connection made me uneasy. When Jasmine finally returned late Sunday evening, she swept into my house with the scent of expensive perfume and ocean air clinging to her clothes. "He had a wonderful time," she declared, though Marcus trudged behind her shoulders, slumped face pale. His arms were bare, his skin pink with sunburn. "How was it, sweetheart?" I asked gently, kneeling to meet his eyes. He shrugged, eyes downcast. "The boat made me sick and I lost my backpack. My project stuff was in it." Before I could respond, Jasmine cut in sharply. "He's exaggerating. Just a little seasickness." "Honestly, Eleanor, he'll survive. Children bounce back. The yacht was 5-star. Richard was incredibly generous." Her tone was defensive, almost as if she knew Marcus's words had betrayed more truth than her polished summary. When she left moments later claiming an urgent meeting, I carried Marcus upstairs. He clutched his stuffed dinosaur as though it were a lifeline. "Mom and Richard went out at night," he whispered, voice trembling. "They left me with a lady I didn't know. I woke up and didn't know where I was. I was scared." I swallowed my fury, forcing calm. "That must have been frightening, but you're safe now, Marcus. You're home." After I tucked him into bed in the room that was always ready for him at my house, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. Every detail went in the trip: the sunburn, the lost backpack, Marcus's whispered confession. I also slipped the receipt I found sticking out of his duffel bag between the pages. A spa charge from the Ritz-Carlton Miami, signed not by Jasmine, but by Richard Townsend. And something else, a small slip of paper with notes about property prices in Belize. Not Santa Fe, as Jasmine had mentioned to me when discussing fresh starts. Later that night, Michael called with news. "Eleanor, I've been looking into Richard Townsend. Townsend Development is courting overseas investors for a waterfront redevelopment project here in Charleston. James suspected something shady. It might connect to why he changed his will." "What kind of shady?" I asked, my voice low so as not to wake Marcus. "Possible zoning violations, environmental impact reports that were altered. James was investigating quietly. He told me he'd found discrepancies in the financial backing shell company's offshore accounts. He was concerned about Richard's influence with the zoning board." "And Jasmine, did James suspect her involvement?" Michael's pause spoke volumes. "He didn't want to believe it, Eleanor. But yes, I think he was starting to see connections. Richard has been to their house for dinner at least twice a month for the past year." The pieces were starting to fit together. James's suspicions. The secret will changes. The safe deposit box. "There's more," Michael continued. "Richard has been buying property not just here but in Belize. Lots of it." The slip of paper from Marcus's bag suddenly made sense. "Michael, we need to open that safe deposit box tomorrow. First thing. I'll meet you at Coastal Trust at 9. As I hung up, I felt a chill despite the warm evening. I checked on Marcus, watching his chest rise and fall in the moonlight that filtered through the curtains. So vulnerable, so trusting, so like his father had been at that age. As I listened, I realized this wasn't just about inheritance or even custody. Richard's shadow stretched further than I'd imagined, and Jasmine was standing squarely in it, dragging Marcus along with her. The Miami trip was only the beginning. I could feel it in my bones the way I used to sense an approaching storm on the Charleston harbor. Something was brewing, and Marcus was caught in its path. That night, I dreamed of the oak tree in my yard. In the dream, James was a child again, swinging from its branches, while Samuel stood below, arms outstretched to catch him if he fell. I called to them, but they couldn't hear me. The sky darkened, lightning flashed, and suddenly James was falling with no one to catch him. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Sleep wouldn't return, so I made tea and sat in the living room watching the first pale light of dawn creep across the floor. Tomorrow, Michael and I would open that safe deposit box. Whatever James had left there, I sensed it would change everything. I only hoped I would have the strength to face what was coming. For Marcus, for James, and for the truth that lay buried beneath the perfect facade Jasmine had constructed. Morning arrived with a soft rain pattering against the windows, the kind of gentle Charleston shower that burnishes the old brick streets to a warm glow. I dressed carefully in a navy blazer and pearl earrings armor for whatever lay ahead. Marcus had returned to Jasmine's house, my house now, according to James's will after breakfast, reluctant but resigned. "Will you help me with my science project tonight, Grandma?" He'd asked, those brown eyes so like his father's searching my face. "Since my stuff got lost." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be there right after dinner." Now, as I drove to meet Michael at Coastal Trust, I rehearsed what I might find. Financial records, legal documents, more letters. Each possibility turned over in my mind like smooth stones in a river. Michael waited for me under the bank's portico, his tall frame sheltered from the light rain, his expression grave but determined. "Are you ready for this, Eleanor?" he asked as we walked inside. "I've been ready since I saw Jasmine's face at that will reading," I replied. James trusted us to finish what he started. The bank manager led us to a private room where the safe deposit box waited sleek and impersonal. I inserted the key with steady hands, and together Michael and I opened the metal container that held my son's final secrets. What we found would change everything, not just for Marcus and me, but for Jasmine and Richard Townsend as well. The evidence James had gathered spoke of betrayal deeper than I had imagined, of schemes that threatened not just our family, but the very foundations of the city James had loved. And as I studied the contents of that box, I knew the real battle was just beginning. The safe deposit box held secrets darker than I had imagined. Michael and I sat in the private viewing room at Coastal Trust, the contents of Box 219 spread before us on the polished mahogany table. My son had been meticulous, organized even in his suspicions. Labeled folders contained printed text messages, private investigator photos, financial records, and a small digital recorder. The photographs told their own cruel story. Jasmine and Richard Townsend entering a boutique hotel downtown, her hand grazing his back with the unmistakable intimacy of lovers. Jasmine at dinner with Richard, laughing over wine at a restaurant I recognized from Hilton Head Island. The timestamp showed a date when she had told James she was visiting her sister in Atlanta. "James hired Callahan Investigations 3 months ago," Michael said quietly, pointing to the logo on the folder. "After he found messages on Jasmine's phone." I opened the folder of text messages. Months of exchanges between Jasmine and Richard, full of coded affection and sharp complaints. "Can't stand another night with him. His ethical hand-wringing is exhausting. Be patient. Once the accounts are settled, we'll be free." Marcus complicates everything. My life wasn't supposed to be like this. My hands trembled as I read the words. My grandson reduced to an inconvenience in his mother's secret conversations. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. But the financial records were what truly revealed the scope of their deception. Shell companies with names like Oceanic Ventures and Palmetto Holdings, property purchases in Belize under Richard's mother's maiden name, wire transfers to offshore accounts. James was building a case, Michael explained. Townsend Development's Harbor Point project involved zoning changes that required city approval. James found evidence that Richard was bribing officials. When James threatened to go to the ethics board, his voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air between us. "You don't think—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility was too terrible to voice. Michael's expression was grim. "I don't know, Eleanor, but the timing is suspicious. James was healthy. The aneurysm was sudden. And look at this." He slid across a medical report. James had undergone a full physical just 6 months earlier. Blood pressure normal. No indication of vascular problems. "This doesn't prove anything," Michael cautioned, seeing my face. Aneurysms can be silent until they rupture, but James was worried enough to update his will and gather all this evidence. I picked up the digital recorder with shaking fingers, pressed play. James's voice filled the small room as clear and strong as if he were sitting beside us. December 18th, meeting with Richard Townsend. He asked me to sign off on environmental impact statements for Harbor Point. The wetlands assessment has been altered. Original estimates showed endangered species habitat would be destroyed. I refused to approve the documents. Richard suggested I reconsider mentioned Marcus's college fund implied it could disappear if I didn't cooperate. This feels like a threat. I closed my eyes, hearing my son's voice calm but strained, always the lawyer documenting facts. December 27th, found messages on Jasmine's phone from Richard. They've been seeing each other for at least a year. She's aware of the Harbor Point irregularities. There's mention of property in Belize, a fresh start once things are settled. I'm copying these messages as evidence. My heart ached for him, discovering his wife's betrayal, realizing she was entangled in Richard's corruption. January 10th, I've updated my will with Michael. Jasmine doesn't know. I've arranged for Mother to have the house and control of Marcus's education fund. If something happens to me, she'll keep him safe. I don't trust Jasmine's judgment anymore. The way she talks about Marcus when she thinks I'm not listening. His voice caught. I heard what sounded like a glass being set down. January 12th, Richard cornered me in the parking garage today. Said if I went to the ethics board about Harbor Point, I'd regret it. Accidents happen, James. Those were his exact words. I'm leaving this recording and all evidence with Michael in the morning. If anything happens to me, this should go to District Attorney Coleman. The recording ended. I sat, frozen tears streaming down my face. James had known he was in danger. He had tried to protect himself to protect Marcus, and he had trusted me to carry on if he couldn't. Did he give you the evidence for the DA? I asked Michael. He shook his head. He was going to bring it the next morning. That was the night he died. The implications settled over us like a shroud. This needs to go to the police, I said. Michael nodded slowly. It does. But we need to be strategic, Eleanor. If Richard suspects we have this evidence, you and Marcus could be in danger. And legally, this alone isn't enough to prove James's death wasn't natural. What about Marcus? My voice broke. If they killed James, that's why we need to secure your custody of Marcus first, Michael said firmly. If we go to the police now, Jasmine could flee with him. She has legal custody as his mother. Your petition needs to be filed before she knows we suspect anything. I understood the terrible calculation. Justice for my son would have to wait until his son was safe. How long will it take? I asked. I've already drafted the petition for emergency custody. We'll file tomorrow morning. With the evidence of neglect from the Miami trip, the missed school conferences, the forgotten medication, plus the fact that James named you trustee of Marcus's education fund, we have a strong case for temporary guardianship. I nodded, gathering the documents with shaking hands. Let's protect Marcus first. Then we'll make sure James gets justice. As we left the bank, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. Michael followed my gaze and placed a protective hand on my elbow. "Keep walking," he murmured. "Don't look back." That night I couldn't sleep. I checked the locks 3 times, tested the new security system, and kept my phone close. Every creak of the old house made me start. Outside, the wind stirred the Spanish moss on the ancient oaks, creating phantoms in the moonlight. I thought of James's voice on that recorder. Had he sensed death approaching? Had he known that night would be his last? The thought of my son facing that knowledge alone was almost unbearable. Around midnight, my phone chimed with a text. "Jasmine, we need to discuss the house situation. I've been more than patient. Dinner tomorrow 7 p.m. at Magnolia's. Just us. Time to settle this." The timing was too convenient. The day before our custody filing. Did she somehow know what we were planning? I showed the message to Michael in his office the next morning. The law firm of Robinson and Merrill occupied the 2nd floor of a historic building overlooking Colonial Lake. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in golden beams that belied the darkness of our conversation. "She's getting anxious," Michael observed. "This actually works in our favor. Meet her. Act conflicted about the house. Tell her you're considering her proposal. Keep her distracted while Judge Carlton reviews our petition." "You think Judge Carlton will grant the emergency hearing?" I asked. "Marisol Carlton has known your family for decades. She'll see the urgency." Michael gathered the final documents for our filing. "The hearing will likely be scheduled for Friday morning. That gives us 2 days to prepare while keeping Jasmine in the dark." I nodded, straightening my shoulders. "I can handle dinner with Jasmine." "I know you can. Just remember, document everything. Record the conversation if possible. South Carolina is a one-party consent state." The weight of what we were doing pressed on me. I was preparing to legally battle my daughter-in-law for custody of my grandson while secretly investigating whether she was involved in my son's death. At 62, I had imagined my days would be filled with book club meetings and volunteer work at the museum. Instead, I was living in a nightmare that felt like one of those legal thrillers James used to read. "One more thing," Michael said, his expression grave. "I've arranged for a private security consultant to do a sweep of your house. If Jasmine and Richard are involved in anything illegal, there's a possibility they've been monitoring you." A chill ran through me. "You think my house is bugged?" "It's just a precaution. Retired police detective, very discreet. He'll check for listening devices, hidden cameras, anything unusual." The thought that my private grief might have been observed, that my conversations with Marcus might have been overheard, sent a wave of violation through me. But I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford the luxury of outrage, not when Marcus's safety hung in the balance. The security consultant, a weathered man named Frank Delgado, arrived at noon. He moved through my house with practiced efficiency, checking light fixtures, electrical outlets, telephone lines. In my study, he discovered a small device hidden behind a family photo, a listening bug the size of a button. "Professional grade," he said, showing me the device. "Not something you'd buy online. Been here a while, judging by the dust pattern." "Can you tell what it might have picked up?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Living room, kitchen conversations. Not the bedrooms, probably. Decent range, but not whole house coverage." "Should we remove it?" Frank shook his head. "Leave it. Let them think they still have ears in the house. Just be careful what you say in this room." After he left, I sat in my garden away from the house and any potential electronic ears. The jasmine was in bloom, its sweet scent carried on the warm May breeze. I thought of my father, who'd taught me to garden as a girl in this same yard. "Plants don't care if you're having a good day or bad day," he'd say. "They just need consistent tending." I needed his steady wisdom now. Needed to believe that careful, consistent action would yield results, that justice and protection could grow from the seeds of truth we were planting. That evening I met Jasmine at Magnolia's, one of Charleston's finest restaurants. She'd chosen a table on the veranda overlooking the harbor, where the fading sunlight burnished the water to copper and gold. She was already seated when I arrived, a glass of white wine half empty before her. "Eleanor." She greeted me with artificial warmth, rising to air-kiss my cheek. "You look exhausted. Are you sleeping?" The concern didn't reach her eyes, which assessed me with cool calculation. "As well as can be expected," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Grief doesn't keep regular hours." "Of course," she murmured, signaling the waiter. "A glass of the Sancerre for my mother-in-law." I smiled tightly. "Just water for me, thank you. I'm driving." Jasmine's lips thinned slightly at this small defiance. She waited until our orders were placed before leaning forward, her voice dropping to an intimate register. "I've been thinking about our situation, Eleanor. It's been almost 2 weeks since James passed. We need to establish some normalcy for Marcus's sake." "I agree," I said carefully, my phone recording in my purse. "Stability is important for him right now." "Exactly, which is why I need to know your decision about the house. The riverfront condo I mentioned is still available, but they're expecting an answer by Friday." Friday, the day of our custody hearing. The coincidence seemed too neat. "It's a big decision," I said. "The house has been in the family for generations. James grew up there." "And now it's where his son should grow up," she countered smoothly. "With his mother. Surely that's what James would want." I thought of the recording in the safe deposit box of James's fears for Marcus. Perhaps. But James left the house to me for a reason. A flash of irritation crossed her face. We both know James wasn't thinking clearly those last few months. He was paranoid, Eleanor, staying late at the office, keeping secrets, making accusations. Accusations. I kept my voice neutral, though my heart raced. She waved a dismissive hand. Work stress. He convinced himself there were improprieties with one of the development projects. Richard tried to help him see reason, but James was... She sighed theatrically. Well, let's just say he wasn't himself. I noted the careful construction of her narrative. James was unstable. His will changes were irrational. Richard was the voice of reason. I hadn't noticed any difference in him, I said mildly. Jasmine smiled tightly. With all due respect, Eleanor, you saw him, once a week for Sunday dinner. I lived with him. I saw the mood swings, the late nights, the obsessive behavior. I sipped my water, letting the silence stretch between us. A tactic I'd learned in decades of parent-teacher conferences. People rushed to fill silence with revelations. Richard and I are worried about Marcus, she continued as I'd anticipated. He needs a fresh start. New surroundings, new opportunities. Charleston holds too many painful memories now. You're considering moving? I kept my tone curious, not alarmed. Santa Fe, she said, watching my reaction. Richard has connections there. It's a wonderful art community, excellent private schools. Marcus would thrive. Santa Fe, not Belize, another lie. That's quite a change, I observed. Have you discussed this with Marcus? Children adapt, she said dismissively. He thinks he wants to stay because of the treehouse, the familiarity. But what he needs and what he wants are different things. When would this move happen? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Soon, which is why we need to resolve the house situation now. I'm prepared to be generous, Eleanor. The house is worth at least $1.2 million in today's market. I'll agree to a payment plan over 5 years. You can keep your own house, and I'll take over the Magnolia Street property. Clean break. I blinked at her audacity. She was offering to buy from me a house that James had legally left to me, using money that would undoubtedly come from Richard Townsend. And if I don't agree to sell? I asked quietly. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. Then things become complicated. Contested wills, legal challenges. Marcus caught in the middle of an ugly court battle. I don't think any of us want that. The threat was unmistakable. I need to think about it, I said. This isn't a decision I can make over dinner. Of course, she conceded with artificial graciousness. Take tonight. Call me tomorrow. As she signaled for the check, her phone chimed with a text. I caught a glimpse of the screen as she checked it. Richard's name and the words, "All set for Friday." My blood ran cold. What was set for Friday? Our custody hearing was at 10 a.m. What were they planning? As we parted on the sidewalk outside, Jasmine squeezed my arm with false affection. Think carefully, Eleanor. I know you want what's best for Marcus. Always, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. I drove home through the gathering dusk, my thoughts churning. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. Dark sedan, tinted windows. As I watched in my rearview mirror, the headlights flashed once, then went dark. Inside, I called Michael, immediately stepping out to my garden to avoid the listening device in the house. They're planning something for Friday, I told him after describing the dinner and the text I'd glimpsed. Could be innocent, he said, but I heard the concern in his voice. Maybe she's meeting with another realtor about the condo. There's a car watching my house, I said. Dark sedan, tinted windows. Michael's voice sharpened. Are you certain? It flashed its lights when I arrived home. Someone's keeping tabs on me. Lock your doors. Don't confront whoever it is. I'm calling Frank Delgado to come over tonight. And Eleanor, his voice grew urgent, don't let Marcus out of your sight tomorrow. Pick him up from school yourself. You think they'd try to take him? Fear clutched at my throat. If they suspect we're filing for custody, they might. Jasmine is still his legal guardian. If they get him across state lines before our hearing. He didn't need to finish. If they fled with Marcus, our legal remedies would be complex and slow. I'll get him in the morning, I promised, and Michael, hurry with that filing. I slept poorly, waking at every creak and whisper of the old house settling. The sedan remained across the street all night, its silent presence a persistent threat. At dawn, I rose and prepared for battle dressing with care in a conservative Navy suit I'd worn for principal-parent conferences in my teaching days. Armor of respectability. At 7:30, I drove to Marcus's school, arriving in the drop-off line 30 minutes early. I waited, watching each arriving car with hawk-like intensity. At 8:15, I saw Jasmine's silver Mercedes pull into the line, Marcus in the passenger seat, his small face solemn. I stepped out of my car and approached as they reached the curb. Jasmine's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" "I thought I'd take Marcus for breakfast before school," I said smoothly. "A little grandmother-grandson time." Marcus's face brightened. "Really, Grandma?" Jasmine's hand tightened on his shoulder. "He can't miss school, Eleanor. He's already behind because of—" She glanced at Marcus. "Everything that's happened." "Just this once," I insisted. "I've already cleared it with Mrs. Carter. We'll work on his science project over pancakes." Marcus looked up at his mother. "Please, Mom, I missed the deadline because my stuff got lost in Miami." Jasmine's jaw tightened, but we were surrounded by other parents' teachers on drop-off duty. A scene would draw attention she couldn't afford. "Fine," she said tersely, "but have him back by lunch period. He has a math test this afternoon." "Of course," I agreed, taking Marcus's hand. As he gathered his backpack, I met Jasmine's gaze. "I'll call you later about our discussion." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Good. Let her wonder which way I was leaning. Marcus and I drove to a small diner away from his school where we ordered pancakes and hot chocolate. As he carefully spread butter on his stack, I studied his face. So much of James in those serious brown eyes, that thoughtful furrow between his brows. "How are you doing, sweet boy?" I asked gently. "Really doing?" He shrugged, then looked up at me. "I miss Dad, all the time, like an ache in my stomach that never goes away." "I know," I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "I feel that too. Mom says I need to move on, be strong, but—" His voice wobbled. "I don't know how to be strong like that. Not yet." "Your father wouldn't expect you to be," I assured him. "Grief takes as long as it takes. There's no rushing it." "Mom and Richard want to move to Santa Fe," he blurted out suddenly. "Mom showed me pictures of a new school there." "But I don't want to go, Grandma. My friends are here, my teachers, Dad's treehouse." My heart ached for his distress. "Have they said when this might happen?" He nodded miserably. "Mom said to pack a special bag with my favorite things for a trip this weekend. But I heard her talking to Richard on the phone. She said something about, if the hearing goes our way." A chill ran through me. They were planning to leave immediately after the custody hearing, whether they won or lost. "Marcus," I said carefully, "what else have you heard Mom and Richard talking about?" He twisted his napkin eyes downcast. "I'm not supposed to listen to grown-up conversations." "I know, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups say things children need to know about, especially things that affect them." He glanced up, then back down. "Richard said Dad was going to ruin everything. He said Dad didn't understand how business works in the real world." "When was this?" "Before Dad died. They were arguing in the kitchen. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard them from the stairs." My pulse quickened. "What else, Marcus?" "This is important. Richard said Dad had a choice to make, that he could either be part of the solution or—" He frowned, trying to remember. "Or he would regret being the problem. Then Mom saw me and sent me to bed." His words chilled me. Another threat, this one witnessed by a child too young to understand its significance. I wanted to ask more, but Marcus was already distressed, and I wouldn't use him as an interrogation subject. He'd lost enough innocence already. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "You've done nothing wrong. But Marcus, I need you to promise me something. If Mom or Richard talk about taking a trip suddenly before this weekend, I need you to call me right away. Can you do that?" He nodded solemnly. "Is something bad going to happen, Grandma?" I squeezed his hand. "I'm going to make sure nothing bad happens to you. That's a promise." After breakfast, I drove him back to school, watching until he was safely inside the building. Then I called Michael. "They're planning to leave town with Marcus after the hearing," I told him. "Regardless of the outcome, Marcus overheard them." Michael's voice was grim. "Judge Carlton granted our emergency hearing for tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'm filing the paperwork now. With what we have, she should grant temporary custody while a full investigation takes place. And if she doesn't," his pause was heavy, "then we need to be prepared to go to the police immediately with everything we have. It won't stop Jasmine from taking Marcus legally as his mother, but it might delay them if Richard is implicated." I thought of the dark sedan watching my house of the listening device in my study of the calculated way Jasmine had manipulated our dinner conversation. They were already moving pieces on a chessboard I was just learning to see. "I need to get that recording to the district attorney," I said, "in case something happens before the hearing." "I've made copies," Michael assured me. "But Eleanor, be careful. These people may have been involved in James's death. Don't underestimate what they're capable of." As I hung up, my phone chimed with a text from Jasmine. "Change of plans. Picking Marcus up early from school for doctor appointment. We'll bring him to your house by 5. My hands trembled as I called the school immediately. "This is Eleanor Jackson, Marcus Jackson's grandmother. I need to speak with Mrs. Carter urgently." When his teacher came on the line, I forced calm into my voice. "Jasmine just texted that she's picking Marcus up early for a doctor's appointment. He was fine at breakfast. Did he mention feeling ill?" "No," Mrs. Carter said slowly. "He seems perfectly fine today. In fact, he was excited about the science project you helped him restart. If Jasmine comes to get him, please call me immediately," I said. "There's been a family misunderstanding. Marcus should stay in school today." I heard the hesitation in her voice. "Eleanor, I can only release him to authorized guardians. His mother is his legal guardian." "I know," I said desperately. "But please call me if she comes. It's important." I hung up and immediately called Michael again. "They're trying to get Marcus from school, now." "I'm on my way to the courthouse with the emergency petition," he said. "I'll see if Judge Carlton can issue a temporary restraining order preventing Marcus from being removed from school without your consent. It's a long shot, but—" "Hurry," I urged. "Please hurry." While waiting for Michael to call back, I drove to Marcus's school parking where I could see the main entrance. My heart pounded in my chest. What would I do if Jasmine appeared? She was still Marcus's legal mother. I had no authority to stop her from taking him, but I couldn't sit by while my grandson was spirited away, perhaps out of the country by the woman who may have been involved in his father's death. At 11:42, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the school's circular drive, the same model I'd seen watching my house. Richard Townsend emerged from the driver's side, straightening his expensive suit, before heading toward the entrance. I was out of my car before I could second-guess myself moving with a speed that belied my age. I intercepted him at the steps. "Richard," I called. "What a surprise!" He froze, then recovered his handsome face, arranging itself into a mask of sympathy. "Eleanor, Jasmine mentioned you'd had breakfast with Marcus. I'm just picking him up for a dentist appointment." "Strange," I said. "Jasmine texted me about a doctor appointment." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "A checkup. Medical, dental, general health." "Where is Jasmine?" I asked, glancing toward the SUV. "Conference call. Work emergency." He tried to step around me. "If you'll excuse me, I spoke with Marcus's teacher earlier," I said, blocking his path. "She mentioned he's having a wonderful day. It seems a shame to interrupt his learning for an appointment Jasmine didn't mention to me at drop-off." Richard's eyes hardened, though his smile remained fixed. "With all due respect, Eleanor Jasmine doesn't need your permission to take her son to the doctor." "Of course not," I agreed pleasantly. "But as Marcus's grandmother and the trustee of his education fund, I take his schooling very seriously. Perhaps this appointment could wait until after classes." The standoff hung between us, neither willing to back down. Then my phone rang Michael. "Excuse me?" I said, turning slightly away. "I should take this." Richard hesitated, then nodded curtly. "I'll reschedule the appointment. Tell Jasmine I'll call her later." As he stalked back to his SUV, I answered Michael's call. "Judge Carlton has issued the temporary order," he said without preamble. "The school has been notified. Neither Jasmine nor anyone else can remove Marcus without your consent until after tomorrow's hearing." Relief washed over me so powerfully that I had to lean against the school's brick wall for support. Thank God. Richard was just here trying to take him. "Stay at the school until dismissal," Michael advised. "Take Marcus straight to your house afterward. Don't let him out of your sight until the hearing." As the SUV pulled away, Richard's eyes met mine through the window. The look he gave me contained no pretense of civility, only cold calculation. In that moment, I knew with certainty that the man who had helped raise my grandson, who had worked with my son, who had dined in my home, would not hesitate to destroy us all to protect himself. The battle lines were drawn. Tomorrow's hearing would determine not just Marcus's immediate future, but perhaps his very safety, and possibly justice for James. I settled on the bench near the school entrance, prepared to wait hours if necessary. The spring sun warmed my face, but I felt a deeper chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I thought of James's voice on that recorder documenting threats in his careful lawyer's cadence. Had he known as he spoke those words into the machine that he was creating evidence of his own murder? My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Why is Richard telling me you're at Marcus's school?" "What are you doing, Eleanor?" I didn't respond. Let her wonder. Let her worry. For once, let Jasmine feel a fraction of the uncertainty and fear she'd inflicted on others. The hours passed slowly. I called Judge Thompson, explained the situation in case I needed additional legal support. I texted Frank Delgado to meet me at my house after school, concerned about what security measures we might need overnight. And I prayed something I hadn't done with regularity since Samuel died, that tomorrow would bring safety for Marcus and the beginning of justice for James. When the dismissal bell finally rang, I waited at the bottom of the steps for Marcus, scanning the flood of children for his familiar face. When I spotted him, backpack slung over one shoulder, talking animatedly with a friend, my heart swelled with fierce love and protectiveness. "Grandma," he said, surprised to see me again, "are you picking me up too?" "I thought we could work on that science project this afternoon," I said, guiding him toward my car. "Your mom said it would be fine." It wasn't quite a lie. Jasmine hadn't responded to my presence at the school, which I took as tacit permission. As we drove home, Marcus chattered about his day, about the science project on renewable energy, about a funny thing his friend Tyler had said at lunch. I let the sound of his voice wash over me, storing each inflection and enthusiasm in my memory. Whatever happened tomorrow, I wanted to remember this moment of normalcy, of my grandson simply being a child, without the weight of adult machinations pressing down on him. At home, Frank Delgado was waiting in an unmarked car, giving me a subtle nod as we passed. Extra security Michael had arranged just for tonight. The black sedan was conspicuously absent from its watchpost across the street. We spent the evening building a small solar panel for Marcus's project, careful to avoid the bugged study. I made his favorite meal, mac and cheese with little hot dog pieces cut into stars, just as James had liked it as a boy. We watched an episode of his favorite science show, Normal Things, Precious Things, while the clock ticked inexorably toward tomorrow's confrontation. After I tucked him in, reading 2 chapters of the adventure novel we'd been working through, I sat on the edge of his bed, studying his peaceful face in the glow of the dinosaur nightlight. "Grandma," he murmured sleepily, "are you and Mom fighting?" My heart clenched. "We have some disagreements to work out. Adult things. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Dad? About what happened to him?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Partly. Your dad made some plans before he died, plans to keep you safe and happy. I'm trying to make sure those plans are followed." He nodded, accepting this with a child's trust. "Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew, stronger than you looked." Tears pricked my eyes. "Your father was a very wise man." "I miss him," Marcus whispered, his voice catching. "I know, sweet boy. I miss him too." I stroked his hair just as I'd done for James countless nights when grief for his own father had kept him awake. "But he's still with us in so many ways, in you, in the lessons he taught us, in the love he left behind." Marcus drifted to sleep, his breathing deep and even. I remained guarding his rest, wondering what James would advise if he could speak to me now. He had been deliberate, methodical in his preparations. He'd trusted me to finish what he started. Tomorrow I would honor that trust, for James, for Marcus, for the truth that had been buried with my son but refused to stay silent. As the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, my phone lit up with a final text from Jasmine. "We need to talk before tomorrow. Meet me at the house on Magnolia Street. 7 a.m. Come alone." I didn't respond, but I knew I would be there. One final conversation before we faced each other across a courtroom. One last chance to understand what had happened to my son and why the woman he'd married had betrayed him so completely. The pieces were in place, the evidence gathered, the authorities alerted. Tomorrow would bring either justice or a new battle. Either way, I was ready. Dawn broke over Charleston with a symphony of colors that seemed oblivious to the storm gathering in human hearts. I stood at my bedroom window watching pink and gold streak across the sky, turning the harbor waters to fire. I had slept perhaps 3 hours, my mind replaying every revelation, every conversation, every piece of evidence we had gathered. Frank Delgado sat vigilant in his car, outside the night having passed without incident. Marcus slept peacefully down the hall, unaware of the battle about to be waged over his future. I dressed carefully, in a charcoal gray suit James had complimented once pearl earrings that had been my mother's sensible shoes, that wouldn't betray my nervousness with an unsteady step. Armor for the day ahead. At 6:30, I kissed Marcus's forehead as he slumbered on, leaving him in the care of Frank's partner, a retired police officer named Gloria, who arrived precisely on time. "He'll be safe," she assured me, her eyes kind but vigilant. "No one will take him on my watch." The drive to the house on Magnolia Street was ghostly in the early morning quiet. Sprinklers hissed on manicured lawns. A jogger nodded as I passed. Normal life continuing while mine balanced on a knife's edge. The house where James and Marcus had lived, where family dinners had been shared and holidays celebrated, loomed before me. Technically mine now, though I'd never had the heart to use the key James had given me years ago. I parked on the street, noting Jasmine's Mercedes in the driveway, but no sign of Richard's SUV. I texted Michael before leaving my car. "Meeting Jasmine at the house now. We'll call when finished." His reply was immediate. "Be careful. Remember, everything is being recorded." The recording device in my purse felt like a talisman of protection. South Carolina's one-party consent laws made it legal, but more importantly, it meant James would have a voice in whatever transpired today. Jasmine opened the door before I could knock her appearance startling in its deliberate dishevelment. The woman who never had a hair out of place now stood before me in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her face bare of makeup, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. "Eleanor," she said, her voice lacking its usual polish, "thank you for coming." I stepped inside, immediately struck by changes in the house. Paintings James had collected were missing from the walls. Shelves that had held family photographs now stood empty. Boxes stacked in the hallway confirmed my suspicions she was already packing. "I wasn't sure you'd show," she continued, leading me into the kitchen. "After yesterday." I settled at the island counter, declining her offer of coffee with a small shake of my head. "You said we needed to talk." She paced the kitchen, her usual calculated composure fracturing at the edges. "I know what you're doing, Eleanor. The emergency petition, the restraining order at the school." So Michael had been right. Someone at the courthouse had leaked our filing to her. "Then you know why I'm doing it." "Because you think I'm a terrible mother." Her voice sharpened. "Because James poisoned you against me before he died. Because I found what James left in the safe deposit box." The words landed like a physical blow. Jasmine froze, her face draining of color. "What are you talking about?" "Box 219 at Coastal Trust," I said quietly. "The photographs, the recordings, the financial records." She gripped the counter, her knuckles whitening. "I don't know what you think you found, but I know about your affair with Richard. I know about the Harbor Point project and the bribes to the zoning board. I know James threatened to report it to the ethics committee, and I know he died the night before he planned to take the evidence to the district attorney." Jasmine's mask fell completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you're talking about. An old woman grasping at conspiracy theories because she can't accept that her precious son had a brain aneurysm. Maybe," I acknowledged, my voice steady despite my racing heart, Or maybe there's enough evidence to warrant a full investigation. Phone records, hotel receipts, wire transfers to Belize, not Santa Fe. Her eyes flickered at the mention of Belize. What do you want, Eleanor? Money? Is that it? You're using Marcus as leverage for a bigger payout? The accusation stung, but I refused to show it. I want my grandson safe. I want justice for my son. And I want you to know that whatever happens in court today, the district attorney already has copies of everything James collected. A lie, but a necessary one. Michael and I had decided to hold off on approaching the DA until after the custody hearing. But Jasmine didn't need to know that. She laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. You think you're so clever, the devoted grandmother protecting her innocent grandson. But you've miscalculated, Eleanor. Judge Carlton is a family court judge, not a criminal prosecutor. Even if she grants you temporary custody, which she won't, it won't stop what's coming. And what's coming, Jasmine? She leaned across the counter, her voice dropping to a whisper. Do you really think you're the only one with evidence Richard has influential friends? Police captains, state representatives, banking officials? One call, and suddenly an elderly woman with paranoid delusions loses not just her custody case, but potentially her freedom. The threat hung in the air between us, but instead of fear, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Jasmine was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Is that why you wanted to meet, to threaten me? To offer you one last chance? She straightened, smoothing her sweater with calculated precision. Walk away. Withdraw the petition. Tell the court you've reconsidered. In exchange, you can maintain your Sunday visits with Marcus. You can keep your house. You can live out your remaining years in peace. And if I don't, her smile was cold, then you lose everything. Your reputation, your standing in the community, possibly your freedom, and you'll never see Marcus again. I stood slowly, gathering my purse. You've made your position very clear. Think about it, Eleanor. Is this really the hill you want to die on at your age? I paused at the kitchen doorway, turning back to face her. You know, Jasmine, I taught history for 30 years. One thing I learned is that people often forget how much the world has changed. They think their power, their connections, their influence will protect them forever. But evidence has a way of speaking its own truth. Her expression hardened. Save your teacher wisdom for someone who cares. You have until 9 a.m. to withdraw your petition. After that, all bets are off. As I walked to my car, my hands trembled slightly, the recording device heavy in my purse. The conversation had confirmed our suspicions and deepened our concerns. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for custody or property, she was fighting to keep secrets buried, secrets that might have cost James his life. Michael was waiting at his office when I arrived, concern etched on his face. You shouldn't have gone alone, he said, guiding me to a chair. I needed to hear what she would say when cornered. I handed him the recording device, and she said plenty. As he listened to the conversation, his expression darkened. These are actionable threats, Eleanor. We should take this to the police immediately. After the hearing, I insisted. Marcus's safety comes first. He nodded reluctantly. Judge Carlton's courtroom, 10 a.m. We have a strong case with the evidence of neglect and James's will provisions. These threats strengthen it considerably. Will Marcus need to testify? The thought of my grandson subjected to courtroom questioning made my heart ache. No, Judge Carlton will speak with him privately in chambers if she feels it's necessary. She's very protective of children in her courtroom. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of preparation. We reviewed affidavits from Marcus's teacher about the missed conferences from his doctor about the neglected prescriptions. We organized the evidence of Jasmine's affair, her plans to leave the country, her threats. At 9:45, we walked together to the courthouse, a stately building of white columns and broad steps that had witnessed generations of Charleston justice and injustice. Inside, the polished marble floors echoed with our footsteps as we made our way to courtroom C. Jasmine was already seated with her attorney Gerald Winters, a sharp-featured man known for his aggressive family law practice. She had transformed again now, wearing a modest navy dress, her hair pulled back, makeup subtle but flawless, a picture of maternal concern. She didn't look at me as we took our seats across the aisle, but the tension between us crackled like static electricity. At precisely 10 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Marisol Carlton entered a silver-haired woman whose reputation for fairness and child advocacy was matched only by her no-nonsense demeanor. "This is an emergency custody hearing regarding minor child Marcus James Jackson," she announced, her voice crisp. "I've reviewed the preliminary petition and supporting documents. Mr. Robinson, you may proceed." Michael rose, his voice steady as he outlined our case. The missed school conferences, the forgotten medication, the Miami trip where Marcus was left with hotel staff while his mother spent nights out, the evidence of Jasmine's relationship with Richard Townsend and their plans to leave the country. "Your Honor," he concluded, "we're not asking to strip Ms. Jackson of her rights as a mother. We are asking for temporary guardianship with Mrs. Jackson, who has provided stability and care throughout Marcus's life, but especially in these difficult weeks since his father's death. This is about Marcus's best interest during an exceptionally vulnerable time." Gerald Winters rose next, his voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor, this case is a sad example of a grieving mother-in-law unable to accept the natural order of things. Mrs. Jackson, while undoubtedly well-intentioned, has inserted herself inappropriately into her daughter-in-law's household following the tragic death of her son. She has kept meticulous records not out of genuine concern, but as part of a campaign to alienate a 9-year-old boy from his mother." He gestured toward my journal. "This obsessive documentation reveals a fixation, not legitimate worry. As for the alleged plans to leave Charleston, my client has indeed considered relocating to provide a fresh start for her son away from painful memories. This is not nefarious. It's natural. Many widows seek new beginnings." Winters continued painting me as a meddling, grief-addled mother-in-law, obsessed with control, manipulating my grandson to turn against his mother. He argued that Jasmine was a devoted mother temporarily overwhelmed by tragedy. Throughout his presentation, I kept my expression neutral, hands folded in my lap, exactly as Judge Thompson had advised. "Never let them see your anger," he'd said. "Let them see your dignity." Finally, Judge Carlton turned to me. "Mrs. Jackson, you may speak." I stood, my knees threatening to buckle, but my voice, thank God, held steady. "Your Honor, I am not here to replace Marcus's mother. I am here because my grandson has lost his father and needs stability. He needs his medication on time. Someone at his school conferences. Someone who won't put him on a boat when he's terrified of the water or leave him with strangers in hotel rooms." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I am here because James asked me to protect his son when he no longer could. The provisions in his will weren't random or spiteful. They were deliberate safeguards put in place by a father who saw concerning patterns and wanted to ensure his son's well-being." I met Judge Carlton's gaze directly. Marcus deserves the chance to grieve his father without being uprooted from everything familiar. He deserves consistency and security during this traumatic time. That's all I'm asking the court to provide. For a long, silent moment, Judge Carlton studied me over the rim of her glasses. Then she nodded and leaned back. "I've heard enough from both sides for now. I'll speak with Marcus privately in chambers, then review the evidence more thoroughly. We'll reconvene in 1 hour." The weight of waiting was excruciating. Jasmine and Winters whispered furiously at one end of the hallway, her manicured hand slicing the air with every gesture. Michael and I sat quietly at the other end, the silence heavy, my stomach twisted in knots. "Did I say enough?" I whispered to Michael. "Should I have mentioned Jasmine's threats this morning? Judge Carlton has the recording," he reassured me. "She'll factor it in along with everything else." The hours stretched like taffy minutes, dragging into what felt like days. I thought of Marcus in the judge's chambers, small and solemn, being asked painful questions about his home life. Would he feel disloyal, answering honestly? Would he understand the stakes? At last the bailiff called us back. Judge Carlton's face revealed nothing as she read from her notes. "Having reviewed the evidence and spoken with Marcus, I find sufficient cause for emergency intervention. Temporary guardianship of minor child Marcus James Jackson is hereby granted to Eleanor Jackson for a period of 60 days. I gasped, softly, relief flooding through me. Ms. Avery Jackson will have supervised visitation 3 times weekly at the Charleston Family Center. Neither party may remove the child from this jurisdiction. A comprehensive family assessment will be conducted during this period, with a follow-up hearing scheduled for July 15th. The gavel cracked against the wood. Decision made. Across the courtroom, Jasmine's face contorted with rage, her polished facade shattering completely. She leaned toward me, whispering through clenched teeth, "This isn't over. You have no idea what I'm capable of." Michael stepped smoothly between us. "Ms. Jackson, all communication now goes through counsel." As she was let out by Winter's fury, written in every line of her body, I realized what had just happened. The court had validated James's fears. His son was protected, at least for now, and I, at 62, had just become my grandson's legal guardian. Michael squeezed my arm. "We need to move quickly. The court will notify Marcus's school about the custody change, but I want to pick him up personally. Jasmine might try something desperate." The thought sent ice through my veins. "Let's go now." But as we hurried toward the exit, a court officer intercepted us. "Mrs. Jackson, Judge Carlton would like to see you in chambers." Michael and I exchanged glances. "I'll go to the school," he said. "Meet me there when you're done." Judge Carlton's chambers were warm and surprisingly informal, with bookshelves lining the walls and family photographs arranged on her desk. She gestured for me to sit. "Mrs. Jackson, off the record, I want you to understand my ruling today." Her voice was gentler than it had been in the courtroom. The evidence of neglect was concerning, but what truly swayed me was Marcus himself. He's a remarkably articulate child. Do you know what he told me? I shook my head. He said, "Grandma makes me feel safe like Dad did. Simple, but powerful." She leaned forward. "However, there's another matter we need to discuss. The recording you provided contains allegations that go well beyond family court jurisdiction, suggestions of financial crimes, corruption, and potentially—" She hesitated. "Questions about your son's death." My throat tightened. "Yes, Your Honor. I've made a call to District Attorney Coleman. He'd like to meet with you and Mr. Robinson tomorrow morning." She held up a hand as I started to speak. "This is not optional, Mrs. Jackson. What I heard on that recording requires official investigation." "I understand," I said quietly. "Good." She softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I believe you've done exactly what a grandmother should do under these circumstances. Marcus is fortunate to have you fighting for him." I thanked her emotions threatening to overwhelm me and hurried to meet Michael at the school. The halls were quiet classes in session as we made our way to the office. The principal, Dr. Hathaway, was expecting us court order already received by fax. "Marcus is in science class," she said. "I'll have him brought down." When Marcus appeared, confusion written on his face, I knelt to meet his eyes. "Hello, sweetheart." "Grandma, what's going on? Why is Mr. Robinson here?" I took his hands in mine. "There's been a change of plans. You're going to stay with me for a while." His eyes widened. "What about Mom?" "Your mom is going through a difficult time right now. The judge thought it would be best if you stayed with me until things settle down. You'll still see your mom regularly." He absorbed this, his young face serious. "Is this because of what I told the judge?" "Partly," I admitted. "But mostly it's about giving everyone time to heal properly after losing your dad." He nodded slowly. "Can I get my stuff from home?" "We'll arrange that," Michael assured him. "For now, let's get you to your grandmother's house." As we walked toward the exit, Marcus suddenly stopped. "Wait, my science project. It's in my classroom. Can I get it? The solar panel we'd worked on so diligently." "Of course." Dr. Hathaway sent a staff member to retrieve it, and minutes later we were heading toward my car, Marcus clutching his backpack and carefully balanced project. That's when I saw the black SUV idling across from the school entrance. Richard Townsend sat behind the wheel, sunglasses masking his expression, but the rigid set of his shoulders broadcasting tension. "Michael," I murmured, nodding discreetly toward the vehicle. He positioned himself between us and the SUV, his hand gentle but firm on Marcus's shoulder. "Keep walking. Don't acknowledge him." We had almost reached my car when Richard emerged, moving with deliberate purpose toward us. "Marcus," he called, "your mother sent me to pick you up." Marcus pressed closer to my side, his free hand slipping into mine. "I'm going with Grandma." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. There's been a misunderstanding. Your mom's waiting at home. She's very worried about you." Michael stepped forward, court order in hand. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Townsend. Judge Carlton has granted temporary custody to Mrs. Jackson. Any attempt to interfere would be contempt of court." Richard's gaze shifted between the document and Marcus' calculation, evident even behind his sunglasses. For a moment, I feared he might try to force the issue, and I tightened my grip on Marcus's hand. But the presence of school staff watching from the entrance and a security guard approaching from the parking lot apparently changed his calculation. With a terse nod, he retreated to his vehicle, but not before fixing me with a look that chilled me to the bone. "This isn't finished," he said quietly. His words meant only for me. "You've made a serious mistake." The SUV pulled away with a squeal of tires. Marcus looked up at me, worry clouding his eyes. "Is Richard mad at you, Grandma?" I smoothed his hair, forcing a reassuring smile. "Grown-ups sometimes disagree, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." But as we drove home, Michael following in his car, I couldn't shake the menace in Richard's voice. This wasn't just about custody anymore. We had challenged powerful people, exposed secrets, threatened their freedom and future. The ruling today wasn't an end, but a beginning. The house on Live Oak Drive had never felt so much like a sanctuary as it did that afternoon. Frank Delgado had arranged for additional security measures, motion sensors, upgraded locks, a direct line to police dispatch. "Just precautions," he assured me, but the gravity in his eyes told a different story. I settled Marcus in the kitchen with milk and cookies, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the extraordinary circumstances. He was subdued, picking at his cookie rather than devouring it with his usual enthusiasm. "Can I call Mom?" he asked finally. The question pierced my heart. Despite everything, he was a child who loved his mother. "Of course you can. After dinner we'll call her together." He nodded, then looked up with those serious brown eyes, so like his father's. "Grandma, did Mom do something bad? Is that why I'm staying with you?" How to answer such a question? I chose my words carefully. "Your mom has made some choices that aren't in your best interest right now. The judge decided you should stay with me while your mom sorts things out." "Because of Richard?" My pulse quickened. "What makes you ask that?" He shrugged, breaking his cookie into smaller pieces. "Mom acts different when he's around, not like herself, and Dad didn't like him. I heard them arguing once." "What were they arguing about?" I asked gently. "Richard wanted Dad to sign some papers. Dad said no, they weren't legal or something. Richard got really angry." He looked down at his demolished cookie. "He said Dad would regret it." Another piece of the puzzle witnessed through a child's eyes. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "You've done nothing wrong. But Marcus, I need you to promise me something. If you ever see Richard near this house, or if he tries to talk to you at school, tell me or another adult immediately. Can you do that?" He nodded solemnly. "Is Richard a bad person?" The simplicity of the question belied its complexity. How to explain moral ambiguity to a 9-year-old? I think Richard makes choices that hurt other people to get what he wants. That's not how good people behave. This answer seemed to satisfy him, and he turned his attention to his homework, the resilience of childhood asserting itself even in these extraordinary circumstances. Later that evening, after a simple dinner and the promised call to Jasmine Terse, supervised by Michael via speakerphone, I tucked Marcus into bed in the room that had been his weekend sanctuary and was now his temporary home. "Will I still go to the same school?" he asked as I straightened his covers. "Yes, sweetheart. The judge wants to keep things as normal as possible for you. And my treehouse, can we still go there?" The question caught me off guard. The treehouse James had built at the Magnolia Street property, technically mine now according to the will. "We'll work that out. Maybe we can build a new one here." He shook his head, suddenly fierce. "It wouldn't be the same. Dad built that one. His initials are carved in the floor with mine." "We'll figure it out," I promised, kissing his forehead. "Try to sleep now. Tomorrow's a new day." After he drifted off, I sat in my living room with Michael going over preparations for our meeting with the district attorney. The evidence from the safe deposit box was arranged chronologically, James's voice on that recorder, the most damning piece. D.A. Coleman is known for being thorough, Michael said. He'll want to investigate before making any move against Richard or Jasmine. Will that be enough to keep them from fleeing? The question had haunted me since the hearing. They still have passports connections. Judge Carlton's order restricts Jasmine from leaving the jurisdiction, but Richard isn't bound by it. I've alerted the FBI about the Belize properties and offshore accounts. That should trigger some monitoring. We worked late into the night organizing documents, preparing statements. At midnight, Michael left, promising to return early for the DA meeting. I checked on Marcus one last time, his peaceful sleep a counterpoint to the storm of adult concerns. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text. Unknown number. You've won the first battle but not the war. I know where you live. I know your routines. I know your weaknesses. Sleep well, Eleanor. I showed the message to Frank Delgado, who had remained on watch outside. He took it seriously, alerting his contacts in the police department, arranging for additional patrols past the house overnight. Could be just intimidation, he said, but we'll treat it as a credible threat. Sleep eluded me. I sat in the darkened kitchen, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of old timbers settling. My mind returned to James, to the courage it must have taken to gather evidence against his wife and her lover, to change his will to prepare for the worst, while hoping it wouldn't come. Had he known as he recorded those final words that he was leaving a map for me to follow? Had he sensed that his time was running short? The thought broke my heart anew. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky when my phone rang. Michael, his voice tense with urgency. Eleanor, turn on the news. Channel 4. I fumbled for the remote, switching on the small kitchen television. The screen filled with flashing police lights, a familiar building in the background. The ticker at the bottom read, Breaking Local Developer Richard Townsend Found Dead in Office. The reporter's voice cut through my shock. Police responded to reports of gunfire at the Townsend Development headquarters around 3 a.m. Richard Townsend, CEO and founder, was pronounced dead at the scene. Sources close to the investigation suggest the death may be a suicide, though police have not confirmed this. Townsend Development has been under scrutiny recently for alleged irregularities in the controversial Harbor Point project. I sank into a chair, the room spinning around me. Michael, what does this mean? I don't know yet, but our meeting with the DA has been moved up. They're sending a car for us in 30 minutes. As I hung up, Marcus appeared in the doorway, sleep-tousled and confused. Grandma, what's wrong? Why is the TV on so early? I quickly switched off the screen, but not before he caught a glimpse of the police lights. Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart, just grown-up news. But as I helped him prepare for school, my mind raced with implications. Richard's death-suicide or something else changed everything. Would evidence disappear? Would Jasmine flee? What would this mean for the investigation into James's death? The district attorney's office was a hive of activity when we arrived, escorted by a somber detective. D.A. Robert Coleman, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and penetrating eyes, met us in a conference room already filled with investigators and assistants. Mrs. Jackson, Mr. Robinson, thank you for coming on such short notice. His handshake was firm, his manner direct. I understand you have evidence pertaining to Richard Townsend and potentially to your son's death. I nodded, sliding the file folder across the table. This is everything James collected before he died: financial records, photographs, recordings. Coleman opened the folder, examining the contents with methodical precision. When he reached the digital recorder, he looked up sharply. Your son recorded threats from Townsend. Yes, Michael confirmed. Multiple instances the last just days before his death. Coleman pressed play, and James's voice filled the room, clear and deliberate. Richard cornered me in the parking garage today. Said if I went to the ethics board about Harbor Point, I'd regret it. Accidents happen, James. Those were his exact words. The district attorney's expression darkened. And 24 hours later, your son died of what was ruled a natural cause, a brain aneurysm. Too convenient, I said quietly. James was healthy. No history of vascular issues. The timing? Correlation isn't causation, Coleman cautioned, though his eyes reflected my suspicion. But this certainly warrants investigation. He turned to one of his assistants. "Get me the medical examiner's report on James Jackson, and contact Judge Watkins about an exhumation order." The word sent a shock through me. Exhumation. The thought of disturbing James's rest was physically painful, but if it could provide answers, prove what I suspected in my heart. "We'll need a statement from you about the custody situation," Coleman continued, "and any contact you've had with Richard Townsend or Jasmine Jackson in recent weeks." For the next 2 hours, we provided detailed accounts of everything the will changes, the safe deposit box, the threats, the custody hearing. By the time we finished, Coleman's desk was covered with notes and files, a complex web of corruption and possible murder taking shape. "What about Jasmine?" I asked finally. "With Richard dead?" "We've placed her under surveillance," Coleman assured me. "If she attempts to flee, she'll be detained. Her accounts have been flagged." As we prepared to leave, the district attorney held me back for a moment. "Mrs. Jackson, I want to be clear about something. If your suspicions are correct, if your son was murdered, building a case will take time, weeks, possibly months, and even then without Richard Townsend's testimony." The implication hung in the air. Richard's death, whether suicide or something else, had removed a key piece of the puzzle. Proving James was murdered, if indeed he was, had become exponentially more difficult. "I understand," I said. "But my son deserves justice, whatever form that takes." Coleman nodded. "In the meantime, focus on your grandson. Keep him safe. Let us handle the investigation." As Michael and I left the building, reporters clustered on the courthouse steps, hungry for details about Richard's death. We slipped out a side entrance, avoiding the cameras and questions. "What now?" I asked as we drove away. "We wait," Michael said simply. "We focus on Marcus, on healing, on building a new normal." The words echoed in my mind as days turned into weeks. Marcus settled into life at my house, attending school, seeing his mother under supervision at the family center. Jasmine, subdued and watchful since Richard's death, went through the motions of motherhood during these visits, but made no effort to fight the custody arrangement. The investigation progressed slowly. James's body was exhumed, additional toxicology tests ordered. Financial records from Townsend Development revealed a complex web of bribery and offshore accounts. 2 city officials resigned. A zoning board member was indicted. But the central question, had Richard Townsend ordered or caused James's death, remained unanswered. The medical examiner found trace amounts of a vasoconstrictive substance in James's preserved tissue samples, but couldn't conclusively rule whether it had caused the aneurysm or been introduced post-mortem. 60 days after the emergency custody hearing, we returned to Judge Carlton's courtroom for the follow-up assessment. Jasmine arrived alone, noticeably thinner, her designer clothes replaced with a simple blouse and skirt. The fire that had driven her seemed extinguished. To everyone's surprise, she didn't contest the continuation of the custody arrangement. "Marcus is better off with his grandmother for now," she told the judge, her voice flat. "I'm not in a position to provide the stability he needs." Judge Carlton studied her carefully. "Ms. Jackson, are you voluntarily relinquishing custody?" A flicker of something grief-fear calculation crossed her face. "For the time being, while I sort things out. Eleanor has been good for Marcus. I won't fight that." Later, as we left the courthouse, Jasmine approached me alone, her expression unreadable. "This isn't surrender," she said quietly. "It's strategy. The DA is building a case against me. Richard's death bought me some time, but eventually—" "You could cooperate," I suggested. "Tell them the truth about what happened to James." A bitter smile twisted her lips. "You really think I know Richard kept his secrets close, even from me?" She glanced toward Michael, waiting by the car. "For what it's worth, I didn't want James dead. Divorced, yes. Out of the way, yes. But not dead." I searched her face, looking for truth in the woman who had perfected lies. "Did you love him ever?" "Once. Before Richard. Before I realized James would always choose his principles over wealth, over ambition." She shook her head. "A man like that was never going to give me the life I wanted." "And now, what kind of life do you have now?" She laughed a hollow sound. "Ask me in 20 years, if I'm not in prison." With that, she walked away, shoulders straight, despite the weight of everything collapsing around her. 3 years passed. The house on Live Oak Drive echoed with a boy's growth, Marcus shooting up 3 inches, his voice beginning to change his interests, expanding from dinosaurs to astronomy to basketball. The pain of losing James never disappeared, but it softened around the edges, transformed from a raw wound to a tender scar. The district attorney's investigation concluded without enough evidence to charge Jasmine with James's death, though she eventually pled guilty to lesser charges of financial fraud and received probation. She moved to Arizona, maintaining sporadic contact with Marcus through occasional phone calls and birthday cards. On the 3rd anniversary of James's death, Marcus and I visited the cemetery together, placing white lilies on the grave that had been disturbed and then restored in our search for truth. "Do you think Dad would be proud of me?" Marcus asked, now 12 and thoughtful beyond his years. Beyond measure, I assured him, my arm around his shoulders that were no longer small. He saw and knew everything good in himself and so much more. Later that evening, as twilight softened the edges of the garden, Marcus brought out a wooden box he'd made in shop class. "I found something in the treehouse," he said, opening the lid to reveal a sealed envelope. "It was hidden under a floorboard. It has your name on it." My hands trembled as I recognized James's handwriting. Another letter, hidden where only Marcus might find it. "When did you discover this?" I asked. "Last week when we were fixing the roof. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you." I opened it carefully, the paper crackling beneath my fingers. "Mom, if you're holding this, it means you did it. You protected Marcus when I couldn't. I know the burden was heavy and I'm sorry, but I trusted you because you taught me to see people clearly. You saw Jasmine for who she was before I did. Please tell Marcus stories about me, the good ones and the mistakes too. Let him know I tried. Let him know he was always my first thought. I love you both beyond words. James." I pressed the letter to my heart, tears slipping down my cheeks. Outside, the jasmine Marcus and I had planted by the porch swayed in the evening breeze, its fragrance mingling with the laughter of the boy upstairs, practicing his jump shot against the backboard we'd installed last summer. James had been right. Love, vigilance, and truth had carried us through. Jasmine had chosen her freedom over her son, but in doing so, she gave me the chance to raise Marcus with the steadiness he deserved. It wasn't the family any of us had imagined, but it was ours, hard-won, imperfect, and precious beyond measure.